Windsurf is so much better than Cursor. Cursor blew my mind for about 3 days. Then it started getting confused as my codebase got larger.
Cursor used to be amazing. Now it's too aggressive with jumping into coding and ignores context. Windsurf just works better.
Rap fact, the pufferfish can inflate up to roughly 3 times it. Wait, how'd this get here? It seems like there's never a shortage of things for developers to fight over, and it just so happens in today's day and age, that thing happens to be AI code editors. Now, there are about 50 of these, most of which are forks off of VS Code, but today we're going to be looking at 3 notable ones, being Windsurf, PearAI, and Cursor, and we're going to decide which one's the best one for you to vibe code your entire career away with. Now, here are the rules for this showdown. Number 1, we're going to score all 3 IDEs based on 4 different categories, the first being how nice the UI is. Now, keep in mind, a lot of these are just forks of VS Code and they allow you to import your settings, so this should be pretty basic. We're going to be looking at the things that they added on top of VS Code. Number 2 is going to be the actual user experience. Is it frustrating to use? Do they make it obvious on how you can use the big features that they have? Number 3, how well do they actually use the AI's capabilities and integrate it within their system? And also number 4, do they have any additional MISC functionalities that are actually useful and interesting? Rule number 2 is we will be using the same LLM model, Claude 3.7, for all of these tests to keep it fair. And yes, Claude 3.7 is the exact model that every single time you ask it to change the color of something, it goes ahead and refactors your entire code base. And number 3, I'm going to pretend I'm a regular user. If it is not obvious that a feature exists, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to rummage through their documentation to try and find things. I'm just going to use it as a normal person would and judge it based on that. First up, we have Windsurf, except this isn't Windsurf. This is actually my VS Code. And if I close this, you'll see my Windsurf looks almost identical because, like I said, these are all forks of VS Code and they let you import their VS Code settings over. But I have this cool thing called Cascade on the right. Now, one thing that you'll see with all these code editors is that you will always have some place to interact with the AI agent, and it's usually something on the right side that you can chat with or show it your code. Now, this right side is a bit cluttered. Like, for example, you have the option to choose between write and chat, which is kind of ambiguous until you hover over and read the tooltip, where write is where the actual agent will actually change your code. And in the chat itself, it's not exactly the easiest to add things into context. So for example, you can add a file like task loop, and you'll see here search isn't the best. Like, I have a file called taskloop.ts, and it is literally the 3rd thing when I search task loop. And also there's very little indicator on what every single type of file is. Not to mention, if you try to do something like configure an MCP, it'll take you to the MCP settings.json. They didn't build a UI around it like Cursor did, so it is a bit harder to work with in general. Now, another nitpicky thing I don't really like, when it actually decides to edit your code, you actually have no insight into what is going on here. It's just generating it blindly. You don't get any preview or anything. So you could just be sitting here for literally minutes not knowing what it's actually trying to do, which is exactly what has happened here. And while it's running, I'll talk about another small quality of life thing that sort of adds up over time, which is the fact that your actual terminal has no buffer or padding between the bottom of the screen. So a lot of the times when you're typing, your text will be touching the very bottom of the window. And if your window is, for example, at the very bottom of your screen, it sort of looks like your text is actually clipping through the bottom of the screen, which isn't that great. For example, Cursor will have something on top which prevents that. And yeah, it looks like it was done refactoring, but if you want to actually see what it did, for example, you have to click here and open the diff and look at the diff through here. There's no way of actually seeing a little preview of what it's done, which isn't the best because sometimes it'll be editing a ton of different files and you'll just want to sort of spot check to see that it's doing it correctly from just a couple lines of code before you decide whether or not it should continue or not. But it pretty much doesn't allow you to do that. It gives you the entire diff without actually knowing a sort of TLDR of what it wrote. Now, this is where these issues sort of all add up. Like, for example, the edit that it's making to this specific file is a pretty big one. And I'm not just going to want it to edit this file. It's going to have to modify a couple of other files, except usually if you're a programmer, your repos aren't 1 or 2 files long. They are a large amount of files, and not every LLM is capable of processing that many tokens. So ideally, you want to do things like add specific files into context. However, because it doesn't keep any running context, or not that it shows at least on the UI, you have to continually add the files that you wanted to edit over and over again, instead of something like adding the files into sort of a global context pool that you can then have a continuous chat with, which actually gets really annoying over time, especially if it starts modifying the wrong files. Overall for Windsurf, I'm going to give the UI a 7 out of 10 and the UX a 5 out of 10. Listen, vibe coding is great and all, but what happens when you want to actually edit the code that AI is writing for you? Trust me, you don't want to be the developer that can't tell whether or not what they vibe coded will get them fired or get them a promotion. And thanks to today's sponsor, Scrimba, you can see what it feels like to learn to code from the future. They have a ton of free programming courses, including full stack, and their innovative Scrim techniques technology allows you to actually follow along by coding while you watch the video. The video actually has a live code editor that pauses to let you code while you are following along with the video. Not only does this actually reinforce what you are learning from these tutorials far better than just watching, but it's also way more fun, which makes it a lot more likely for you to stick to it and become a great programmer. Most of their courses are free and they cover a ton of technologies, but I'm so excited that they now have full stack courses. Their literal mission is to try and make sure that you guys are job ready in whatever technology you want to learn. Like I said, you don't want to be one of those engineers that has no idea what AI is outputting and you can't actually code yourself. You can check out Scrimba in the links in the description or the pinned comment below. See what it feels like to learn in the future and take your career into your own hands. Next up, we have Cursor. First of all, the UI is a bit cleaner. We don't have all that clutter on the top like Windsurf has. And also the left side you can see has been replaced by this little tab on the top, which is different than VS Code, but I got used to this really quickly, so I actually kind of like it. It feels a lot more clean. And of course, in their terminal, they have this little thing at the bottom which prevents your text from touching the absolute bottom of the window, which makes it a lot easier to work with and read. Now, as you can see here on the right side, they have the same chat UI, except this one's a lot more clean and it comes default with the file that you are currently looking at in context, which is nice. Of course, it has a drop down for the actual model you are using, as well as some other settings. And they do have that little context thing like I talked about. If I know I'm going to be working on the task loop today, and I know the files that are going to need to be modified and the files that the AI agent should have in context, I'm going to specifically choose which files those are, like for example, taskloop.types, etc. And it makes it a lot easier to just add the files you need in context to make sure you don't go over any context windows. And in general, I just find the UI to be a lot more clean. For example, the MCP section, while yes, you still have to click this and add it here into the JSON, you at least get a better UI to show you which MCPs you have that are actually working. Now, just like Windsurf, when you're actually generating the code, you can sort of see what it's doing. And they even have like a thinking mode where if I enabled that, it will show you all the thoughts of what it's trying to do. But again, sometimes you'll ask it to modify a single file and it'll just be sitting there modifying it for like a couple minutes, especially if the file is like something like this, which is like 500 lines. But when it does do it, you can sort of see like it'll create this little mini preview in the chat. And I can't tell you the amount of times I was able to see it modify a couple different files. And just from this little preview, I could have been like, whoa, what you are doing is not what I wanted and I want to stop. And it gives you a lot more control when you're actually working with the AI. And it kind of feels more collaborative than just like, okay, go solve a Rubik's Cube for the next like 5 minutes. And then after, when you're done, maybe, you know, the code that you look through for another 10 minutes will be acceptable. Whoa, I just noticed how cool the Rubik's Cube looks like with the whole green screen filter on. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and give Cursor a 9 out of 10 for UI and a 9 out of 10 for UX. I think less is more, and they definitely executed on literally the like most important features that you're actually going to be using these tools for. Now, this is my first time actually using PearAI, so I was doing the actual setup flow and it let me choose my color schema from dark to light. I hope it also lets me choose the existing theme I had as well. Right off the bat, I actually do like this look quite a bit. It has the classic VS Code look, but on the right, it does feel a bit more modern. It does have the weird terminal thing just like Windsurf does, but I definitely like the UI a lot better than Windsurf. Now, the buttons on the top do have sort of like almost a cartoonish or like game style feeling to it, but it is pretty interesting that they have a whole bunch of different things that you can actually do. I'm going to stick to the agent for now. And one thing that's immediately sort of lacking is like when I hover over these, it doesn't tell me what they are. It doesn't seem like there's any tooltips. Like for example, I'd love to know what this button is. Okay, this one's for MCPs and it looks like it's going to be the same type of JSON as before. And they do also have a little thing where you can add context in. So for example, task loop. It doesn't have the same coloring like to tell you what kind of files these are. And it also doesn't look like it actually formats it in the chat itself to like give it a different look. So if I were to add a bunch of different files here, the chat sort of does kind of start to look a bit overwhelming. And they do have a button here that allows you to enhance your actual prompt. It looks like I have to log in for it to work. Okay, looks like it failed to enhance. So we're just gonna go ahead and send this prompt. Oh my goodness, it shows you the cost, which is actually like quite nice. I might just be like too zoomed in or something, but it looks like it keeps an actual overview of the actual cost at the top, and then it adds to it as things are going on. Okay, and you can go over here to like open and close the actual thing I'm guessing it sends to the LLM, which is actually pretty cool to know, and to be able to see the cost. That's something that I haven't seen integrated to any of the other tools. The one thing is, it looks like when you're using it with a custom theme, it can sort of break. Like maybe that's why they try to get you to either use the dark mode or the light mode. And it looks like it actually is giving you the different costs as you're going. Oh, and it looks like the code is like sort of of building itself real time, which is sort of nice. Like I said, any preview into what it's actually trying to do while you're sitting there as waiting is better than nothing. So while it's not the most scrollable thing and it's kind of jumping all over the place, I think the intention here is good. Now, one interesting thing here is I just clicked cancel to stop it and it terminated like the entire chat. I wonder if there's a way to, for example, undo or choose to redo all of these. And it doesn't look like there is. I mean, with Cursor and Windsurf, if you don't like what it did, you can click like the revert or reject all changes, and you can revert back to like the previous states that you've had in the past. It doesn't look like that is a possibility here, so it's going to make this a lot harder to use just on a daily basis without those two features. Now, all that being said, I actually did like what they did with the UI, and I found the UI to be better than Windsurf's. However, some of it wasn't working, so just because of that, I'm going to give it a 7. And the UX, I think they are going into the right place. Like once they execute on their vision, it'll actually be a lot better than both Cursor and Windsurf. But in its current state, it felt really buggy and sort of not really usable on a daily basis. So I'm going to give it a 3 out of 10. Now, moving on to the coding and the functionality test, I'm going to do 2 different things here. First, I'm going to try and get it to one-shot a landing page, sort of like what I made with VO here. And it's going to have to be able to do that with no code at all in the repository. So we're going to see how good it is from creating something from scratch, as well as taking an existing repository or a large file like I had before and refactoring it, and we'll see how they do. So it looks like after almost 4 minutes, when I asked it to refactor my giant task loop, it looks like it just kept running into a cascade error for an invalid tool call over and over again, and then it just told me it couldn't do it and told me how to do it myself. So I gave it a bit more direction on how I want it to be refactored, and I guess this is going to run for another like 4 minutes. So in the meantime, we're going to actually try out the page it decided to make from scratch. It looks like it actually runs, which is a great sign. Always remember to end your prompts with a happy face, so if AI ever becomes sentient, they don't come back and, try to kill you or anything. Another thing that I think all these editors don't do well, and it's not necessarily their fault, but like Claude 3.7's fault. Like, for example, it wanted to npm run dev, but we were already running it, and it saw that the port was in use, but then it just kept spiraling into, oh my god, what? The port is in use. What are we gonna do about that? And it just it's still going on about like random shit. Anyways, it looks like the site still isn't working. Okay, so for the landing page, I decided to just give it a create next app and let it do it from scratch. And then I added it here, but then when I asked it to do it again from the create next app, it didn't realize we already had a repository and tried to create another one instead. Okay, so it looks like for the big context task, it did a pretty good job. Like, for example, it knew it had to create it in the examples folder, which I've had a bit of issues with in the past. And overall, the actual code looks pretty solid. Like, they knew, for example, the specific standards I had in the other examples in this folder. So overall, it's pretty impressive that it can do that from a giant repository like this. I guess they don't allow you to add context because maybe they're so good that they don't even need it. So I've been trying to get it to do this like stupid landing page thing for like almost 10 minutes now. I've literally just been sitting here waiting for this to finish. And now it's trying to do something related to Python. I asked it to modify. I literally like redid the prompt, except with a brand new like create Next.js app, and I just asked it to do the thing, yet somehow it's trying to run Python. I don't know if this is like a Claude 3.7 thing. I think it is. I shouldn't have used Claude 3.7 for this. I should just use 3.5. But what the fuck is going on here? And of course, somehow after I get it to actually run, it's just the default page. It looks like it literally added nothing except a blank HTML page. I have absolutely no idea how this could have ended up so bad. Like, either I did something completely wrong, or I don't know, maybe I just got unlucky. I guess we'll see with the other editors. And while I was waiting for all of that to work, I tried to research all the cool different features from Windsurf. And it seems like other than just, for example, like being able to chat, autocomplete, and have the AI write your code and integrate MCPs, they don't have anything that's like too crazy. So overall, I'm gonna give it a 6.5 out of 10 for coding. Honestly, I feel like normal everyday tasks are probably a bit worse on Windsurf just because it's so much harder to audit the code it's actually writing. But the one situation where it actually works is if you have an existing large code base, you don't want to give the AI any context whatsoever, and you just want to Hail Mary that it can do whatever you need it to do. I guess it works really good for that. And yeah, they don't have anything too special, but they have everything you would need. So I'm giving it a 7 out of 10 for the miscellaneous features category. So right off the bat, I'm having Cursor do the whole create a landing page. I'm not doing it from scratch because Windsurf was also not able to do it from scratch. So let's see if it could just handle it. If I ask it to do it with a Next.js app already made. And in the meantime, it's also trying to refactor the task loop. I'm already getting so much more haptic feedback from Cursor. Even if I know it's just reading this file or that file, it feels like it's running faster, even though I don't think it is running faster on the back end. And like I said, the UI is just so much nicer too. And I forgot to mention it, but Cursor, and I think Windsurf has it as well, but there's a setting called YOLO mode, which makes it so you don't have to click like this run command button every single time you want to run just like a regular thing. And you can safeguard it, like it won't do anything like delete files, but it has the capability of like, you know, npmi and stuff like that. Now on the other side of things, for the bigger repository that I want to do something, it doesn't look like it's going nearly as well as Windsurf was. Like it looks like it's stuck in some loop of listing out and reading a bunch of directories. I guess we'll see if it fixes itself. Okay, so it looks like it just timed out after 25 calls. I'm gonna have it resume. And in the meantime, it looks like our landing page is finally ready to test. Okay, we didn't get anything like spectacular, but we actually got something, which is better than the default Next.js app with like some HTML, like public.html page edit. And it looks like it also finished the inverted calculator agent. And again, it added this one in the correct folder, and it sort of looked like it did everything that Windsurf actually managed to do here. There's some small things, like for example, it's using latest instead of workspace, which Windsurf picked up on, but this one also created a .env.example, which Windsurf didn't remember to do. So overall, it looks like this was able to perform sort of better in actually creating it, but worse in inferring what it should create based on the context of the repository overall. And Cursor was able to perform a lot better on just a fresh new install of Next.js. And feature-wise, I think Cursor has like the same things that Windsurf does, like being able to ask the web for things or use images for your prompts instead. So they're probably around the same. Now, in terms of scoring, I'm going to give Cursor an 8 out of 10 for its UI. It just seems like it performed a bit more consistently and a bit better. And also it expects you to provide context, but even when I didn't, it was still able to go through my code base and put the right code where it needed to, which I get Windsurf is supposed to do that out of the box. But I mean, like it was editing the HTML file in the Next.js app. So I mean, I don't really get how that's supposed to work. And of course, I'm sure a lot of it comes down to the LLM under the hood, but just because of the fact that I think Cursor is a bit more consistent, you can add files to context, I think it does pull ahead. And the 7 out of 10 for MISC is just going to be the same as Windsurf because I think they offer pretty much the exact same features. Now for PearAI, I want to use Claude 3.7 to keep it consistent, but it looks like if I try to go to a different provider like Anthropic and use Claude 3.7, I have to input my own API key. So for now, we're just going to stick to what it has. And again, the UI is kind of unusable. Like I have to sort of zoom out because this big thing at the top is like unmovable and the chat below it is doing stuff. And yeah, it's doing like a ton of stuff here. It's kind of hard to follow what's actually going on. Like as you can see, everything's sort of just like spiraling at the same time, and I don't know if it's because these things haven't finished yet or if it's just like a UI bug, but it looks like I guess when the entire process finishes, it all finishes. But that did seem a lot faster. Of course, it was using a different model. Oh, okay, so that was just to get to the point where it was creating the directory. Okay, and it looks like the code it's creating is actually quite good. Like it seems like to be on par with Cursor, even though it's not using Claude 3.7. The problem is the UI is just so difficult to follow along with and understand what is going on here. It's just like going at light speed, which I know I have auto approve checked to be on, but none of the other IDs had this issue. Okay, so it looks like for the landing page, while I wait for the other one to complete, it did have an error in terminal, so I copy and pasted it in here. Now with Cursor, I think if you copy an error in terminal and place it into the actual chat, it sort of like gets that context from chat itself. But here, I guess you have to manually copy and paste. And it looks like we're just running into errors over and over again over here. I don't know what model their pair model is using under the hood, but the fact that it was able to know from this giant repository where to pull what was pretty impressive, and it did it in a lot faster time. The other thing I actually like about Pair is when you click npm run dev and you actually run the command, it'll run it in your actual terminal as opposed to like in this little mini terminal that it spins up in the chat. But yeah, I don't think we're going to get the landing page running anytime soon. Now, in terms of additional functionality, it looks like Pair does have a couple things. Like for example, they have a different tab for this perplexity Perplexity powered search. And Windsurf and Cursor do have like a sort of web search already built in, so I guess that's the same. The other cool thing it has is this thing called memories. It looks like it just sets the sort of system message with predefined facts that you add in here, so that if, for example, you find that the LLM is constantly making a certain mistake or it's not responding or doing things that you want, you can sort of set like the system prompt almost to include these things so that it doesn't forget, which sort of feels like sort of a reskin in something that already exists, but it's also sort of nice to have it in plain sight. Also, another kind of small nitpicky thing is they don't have a separate settings thing just for PearAI. It looks like the actual settings thing, it leads you to this, which is the VS Code settings, which both of the other IDs have a specific button for. So for example, if I open the settings in Cursor, you'll see that they separate the Cursor settings from the VS Code settings. So if you specifically want to modify something in Cursor, this is where you find it. But overall, not having the ability to pick and choose very specific changes, the fact that I can't revert to like the state of one part of my chat, which I use almost every single time when I'm using Cursor or Windsurf, and the fact that the AI is kind of broken in a way where it's just shotgunning like code to the point where you have no idea what is going on and it's almost impossible to follow, does make it feel like it's kind of lacking in everyday miscellaneous features that you would want to use on a daily basis. And if I was them, I wouldn't really focus on adding all these extra bells and whistles until the core product was in a usable state. So for the miscellaneous, I'm going to get it a 5. Like I said, I feel like they have a lot of potential and it seems like they're moving in the right direction, but the core offering is just really lacking compared to Cursor or Windsurf. And overall, this is what our final scoring looks like. I think Cursor by far is the better experience depending on what you are doing. Price-wise, I think it is a bit more expensive than the competitors, but honestly, the quality of code and the quality of life I get from using Cursor outweighs those couple extra dollars I might be spending per month using it. And even though PearAI didn't score as high as Windsurf, I do think that Windsurf was probably my least favorite experience out of the three. While it was a lot more usable than Pear, it sort of left me with a bad taste in my mouth because it felt like a lot of the attention to detail just wasn't there. And of course, a lot of that wasn't there with PearAI as well when it did end up working. But just the fact that I know the PearAI guys are like 2 people working on it and they have something that sort of performs as well as Windsurf, who's an actual decently sized company and has a lot more resources to work with, kind of left me with a bad taste in my mouth. And if you're really stressed about which IDE you should choose, listen, I don't think it's that big of a deal. Like Tom here said, all of these tools are pretty amazing, but they have zero moat or lock-in. Users will switch to whichever one is the best in the moment. And that's been true for pretty much every LLM. People don't just stick to ChatGPT, it's whatever's the best in the moment. It's been true for image generation. For example, it started off with Midjourney, but now everyone's making Studio Ghibli memes with ChatGPT. And it will definitely be the same with code IDEs. Who knows what it'll be in a year from now. And if you like this video, make sure you subscribe and I'll see you guys in the next one.